Welcome, everyone. I'm Phyllis Chamberlain. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. We'll get started in about a minute or two. We just want to give people time to come in for the waiting room, which just takes a couple minutes. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just about a minute or two. We're just giving folks time to come in from the waiting room. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Phyllis Chamberlain. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania, and we're here today to do a few things. First, we want to continue to celebrate the very significant victory and all the advocacy that went into that victory of creating $375 million in the most recent state budget for housing and for home repair. We want to thank all of you. We want to thank ourselves, but mostly we want to thank the two senators that have joined us this morning, Senator Hughes and Senator Saval. And I just want to say that in addition to your advocacy, Senator Hughes and Senator Saval, of being really effective, it's also always very consistent. You're always looking for opportunities to make housing a priority within the state legislature and with your colleagues, both in terms of funding and in terms of better policy. So thank you for continuing to champion this effort. So today we're going to hear from the senators. We're going to talk about what we know about those new programs. And then we're going to do a deeper dive into whole home repair so that as you think about creating and receiving funding for a program in your community, how you might approach that. I just want to make a quick few announcements before we get started. So if you have a question at any time during the webinar, please put your question into the Q&A. We try to steer you to the Q&A and not the chat. And the reason is that we have a harder time keeping track of questions in the chat. And also, if we don't get to answer your question, we download the Q&A and we try to answer all those questions after the webinar. So please just use the Q&A. Then on Monday, registration opens for our annual Homes Within Reach conference. The conference will be in Hershey again this year. So for the second time, December 7th through 9th. So look for that email coming out on Monday. Fingers crossed, and maybe pray to the technology gods that it'll all work out and you'll be able to register on Monday. All right, so with that, I'm going to introduce Aaron Zappia, who is the Housing Alliance's Senior Government Relations Manager. He is the one that's running around the Capitol, advocating for these programs in addition to many other things. Aaron, I'm going to pass it to you, although I seem to also be having a hard time figuring out how to stop sharing my screen. So Aaron, take yourself off mute and I'll see if I can figure out how to do that.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much, Phyllis. Hi, everybody. Good to be back together again. I am Aaron Zappia, Senior Government Relations Manager at the Housing Alliance, and I'd like to welcome our two very special guests today, Senator Vincent Hughes and Senator Nikil Saval. Senator Hughes represents the 7th Senate District, parts of Montgomery County and Philadelphia. He is our Democrat Appropriations Chairman, and Senator Nikil Saval representing the 1st District in the city of Philadelphia. He is our Democrat Urban Affairs and Housing Chair. And these two senators have led us on an incredible journey in 2022, towards a $375 million victory for housing, but more importantly, the creation of 2 new programs that we feel are going to shape the future of housing investments in the Commonwealth. So, Senators, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. So we want to get kind of an overview of the new programs. How did we get here? What can we expect? What do we know so far? So I think it would be good if we could start with Senator Hughes, who was the engineer behind housing options. So Senator, welcome. And how did we get here?
Well, thanks, Aaron. So I think before we do anything else, it's important, and please bear with me because I may have to slip away for a second to plug in my computer because the battery thing is like boom, 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 wearing down. But it's not going to take too long. All right. And I know all of you know exactly what I'm talking about. So there you have it. I think it's important to say a couple things. First of all, most important, let me just thank everybody on this call and those who could not make it on the call. And I'll take the liberty of saying on behalf of my colleague, Senator Saval, and everyone else. First, thank you for all of the advocates, for all of the folks who are in the business of building housing, for all of the folks who have been working extremely, extremely hard to try to lift up housing as an important priority. Let me just say thank you. And just because your advocacy, your work, your involvement in this space means the world to us. When this whole thing caught fire for us, it largely was your work on the ground for many, many years that build the base for us to kind of like work off of, right? And when we had extra dollars available from American Rescue Plan dollars to very significant state surplus, it was, I don't want to say it was easy, but the fact that you had done the advocacy work for many, many years allowed us to really catch that and really push that forward. And so I just want to remind folks, number one, thank you. But also, number two, advocacy works, and that is a message that I think we all need to make sure that we don't lose sight of. Advocacy, getting involved, speaking very boldly about the need in this space has an impact, and in this case, it worked. 18 months ago, the state of Pennsylvania was spending about $55 million of its own funds on housing efforts. Now that number, as was mentioned in the introduction, has grown to 430 million. And we have to say, and Senator Saval, we had this press event with the governor and, in front of the Wynn Plaza, and we kept mentioning the number 430. And Representative Jordan Harris said, that in the community, we hear a number often enough, you need to play that number on the legal lottery, right? And the lotto. And lo and behold, the number 430 came out the next day, 430 straight on the legal lotto. So just keep that in mind, okay? For whatever it's worth, okay? But advocacy works. Got to thank all of our colleagues in the Senate and the House, definitely driven by, and I have to, just say it straight up, and this is not a partisan, this is a factual conversation, driven by the Democratic caucuses in the House and the Senate, really, really, really made sure that this was a priority. And we have to thank the governor as well for, making sure that it got all the way home in budget negotiations. Governor Wolf was a champion, and he stuck with us throughout this entire process. And of course, some significant staff people. Senator Saval will talk about his folks. I have to mention Tony Marchowski and Mike Deary, who probably all of you have called at some point or another in my office for help on a particular project. You know, just huge, and of course led by our senior big dog, for lack of a better term, Mark Mikhailo. Let me just say this: that why are we advocacy works, but the other piece that we need to build into this as we put together the details of this, both in the housing options program, and Senator Saval will speak about home repairs, is we want to make sure that we take our time and put together a solid program that has gotten significant input and has the infrastructure to execute it, because we have to be able to we have to have something strong enough in place that performs well and that allows us to come back and refund it next year and the years going forward. So we're not rushing to try to, just put up something real quick that may not that may sound good and feel good, but we're making sure we're getting good input and we're doing the appropriate detail work, trying to dot our I's and cross our T's, so that as we approach the new administration, and we all know who we hope it would be, that we can come to the table and say, this is working, we need to refund it because the crisis is significant. And so just think about that. We've had a lot of conversations with PHFA, the senior staff at PHFA, but a lot of folks in the space and housing space over the last several months to try to make sure that we do this thing and do this thing correctly. And I know PHFA will talk, I believe, at some point in this presentation. Principles that are kind of like guiding principles for the housing options program. We got to get more units built. We got to get more workforce and affordable units built. We cannot escape. We cannot escape the reality that there just are not enough units being constructed that are accessible and available for teachers and nurses and modest income individuals, in addition to the affordable housing reality that exists. We have to rehabilitate existing units. Okay, we got to make sure, and Senator Saval will speak to that clearly with whole home repairs. But housing options program can kind of add another piece into that piece as well. We have to take the current stock and see how we can fix those up and make sure that they're available. We have to deal with preservation of existing housing units. It's been a difficult situation, but it really has, I think, educated us and informed us all, and brought to very high relief this issue about units that are coming off the rolls, that have been in the system for 30 years or so, but are now falling off the rolls and are moving towards a greater level of unaffordability. And what I'm speaking about is the UC townhome situation. As that hopefully gets worked out, hopefully prayerfully, I don't know how, but hopefully prayerfully, as that gets worked out, what that has done is really push forward the public conversation. We now are seeing in a very real way what that can mean. And we're talking about thousands and thousands of units, obviously in Philadelphia, but all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that are similarly situated. And we have to figure out how we can avoid a very significant catastrophe if we don't figure out how to deal with that. We have a bit of a model that we've worked off of, that we were blessed to have in front of us, available to us when I want to say it's about a 12-story tower at PCOM, Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, was coming off the rolls, and we were able to fortunately relocate a number of those individuals in a PHFA project, low income housing tax credit project, at the Wynn Plaza, in the Winfield section. So we were blessed to have that coming on the rolls. As this one was coming off the rolls, a lot of folks moved over there. But not enough of those pieces are being developed. So we got to figure out our way to deal with this whole issue of preserving existing units. We're also thinking about how we can focus on not just the big deals, but also the smaller deals, if you will, the onesies and twosies, for lack of a better term. You all know what I'm talking about. You all housing people, smaller unit projects that sometimes just get lost in the conversation. So we're trying to think about how we can assist those and create more opportunity there. Those, in many respects, are the inside the neighborhoods that a lot of times just get neglected. We got to figure out how to help those out. Those also help out much smaller and much more diverse contractors to deal with those work, to deal with that work. And we need to think through those. So those are some of the guiding principles that we're working through as we work with PHFA to stand up this project. Again, execution of all of this will be fundamental, because we need to make sure that we do it and we do it well, so that we can have a foundation that we come back to the table on to ask for additional dollars going forward. And again, as I said, the need to advocate and to continue the advocacy is hugely important as well. Because as this was a dramatic, historic increase in the housing space, it still pales with respect to what needs to be done to expand the options for workforce housing and low-income and affordable housing. So I think, Aaron, that's probably my quick and dirty with respect to my presentation. Hopefully we'll wrap up our conversation with PHFA sooner rather than later. I think we will. And then we'll get this stuff on the street and let everybody get ready to rock and roll and get this stuff done. But again, thank you all very much for your good work, for your advocacy, for your commitment, and for doing a lot of good stuff with not enough resources. Now we're bringing a dramatic new amount of resources to the table. And hopefully we'll get a dramatic increase in the number of units available for folks to live out their dream, and hopefully transition to home ownership, which is important to us as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. And, if you can stick around, we may have some questions. So whole home repair. This is something that we were on quite a roller coaster ride since the beginning of 2022. It looked good, it looked bad, and we didn't know it was going to happen, and then we won. So Senators Saval, the engineer behind whole home repair, everyone is extremely excited about. Senator, again, welcome, thank you, and maybe you can give us an overview again of how did we get here, what's the program going to be all about. I'll turn it over to you, Senator.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron. Really appreciate this opportunity to speak about whole home repairs. I do absolutely have to thank you and Phyllis and the entire Housing Alliance team for inviting me to be part of this. Thank you so much for, your advocacy. I mean, I think people may not, as Senator Hughes was speaking very powerfully to the importance of advocacy. We had a lot of visible and powerful events across the state. We had a lot of also just in the halls work, and Aaron, you and the Housing Alliance did quite a bit of that work. So it took all of us, and so we're very grateful. Very grateful to be here with Senator Hughes, who has been a fierce advocate for housing for communities across Philadelphia and throughout Pennsylvania. And someone I just consider a friend and mentor, in addition to being a colleague and a quite a champion for this program in the budget process. So this is an exciting time. I think we've been kind of alluding to this for housing in Pennsylvania and simply for homes. We've had decades of disinvestment in Pennsylvania's housing throughout all levels of government. But we've known, Senator Hughes mentioned the kind of number that we were spending up until this point, up until this year, and how much it's increased. And this victory is not an accident. It comes by way of a tireless coalition of community organizations, housing and energy advocates, many of whom are here on this call, Pennsylvania residents and elected representatives in the Senate and House. One of these victories is an effort, of course, that we're talking about today, which is the Whole Home Repairs Program. The Whole Home Repairs Program establishes as a one-stop shop for home repairs and weatherization, while building out our local workforce and adding new family-sustaining jobs in a growing field. It is the first of its kind in the nation, and it makes it so that Pennsylvanians can stay warm, safe, and dry in homes that they can afford. So I want to talk a bit about where the idea for the Whole Home Repairs Program came from, what it is and how it works, and why I think we were ultimately able to be successful in moving it from a concept to a law. So if we can go to the next slide, please. There we go. So first, let's talk about the housing crisis, generally, but we'll focus on Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has some of the oldest housing stock in the nation. Hundreds of thousands of homes across the Commonwealth have moderate to severe physical inadequacies. And in May, a survey conducted by Data for Progress and People's Action found that 1 in 4 Pennsylvania voters lives in a home that needs a critical repair. Deferred maintenance and system upgrades can result in homes with energy inefficiencies, which impose utility burdens on communities that can least afford them. In Philadelphia, for example, low-income households spend an average of 23% of their household's income on utilities alone, while 1 in 3 Pennsylvania voters reports that their utility bills are, quote, unaffordable. A household that can't afford urgent repairs or upgrades may be forced into an untenable situation, living in a home that is fundamentally unsafe, abandoning it, or selling it to a speculator for far less than their property is worth. Next slide, please. At the same time, our housing crisis is inextricable from our worsening climate crisis. By mid-century, annual precipitation in Pennsylvania is expected to increase to 8%, with extreme rainfall events projected to increase in magnitude, frequency, and intensity. The state's average annual temperature is expected to rise 6 degrees Fahrenheit in the same time period. This hotter and wetter weather will continue to accelerate the deterioration of our aging housing stock under conditions that these homes were never designed to withstand. Next slide, please. This past year, my team and I, our office, held 3 separate policy hearings on Pennsylvania's housing crisis. And in each, we worked to ensure that the voices and experiences of Pennsylvania residents were centered. Underlying so many of the testimonies was the fact that people's homes, regardless of whether they rented or owned, were unsafe. In some instances, residents shared that they had nowhere to turn because not only were they struggling, but their family members as well were experiencing the same hardships. So they couldn't leave their home to stay with their family members' home because their family members also had critical repair issues. And these repair issues include lead paint, which can sicken their children, lack of adequate heat, even in the dead of winter, water damage from burst pipes or leaky roofs and windows, which can cause mold, not being able to adapt their homes to meet changing physical needs, and as I mentioned, exorbitant utility burdens. This inability to repair and update one's home is an intractable problem. Rural and urban counties alike are engaged in a shared struggle against the detrimental effects of blight, abandonment, vacancy, and displacement, and the accompanying community-wide harms that this cycle triggers. And as we discovered from these hearings, no statewide structures existed that could really respond to the magnitude of this need. Next slide, please. So the Whole Home Repairs Program is designed to meet the real material needs of Pennsylvania programs. Passed in the state budget in July with a $125 million appropriation, It is poised to become Pennsylvania's one-stop shop for home repairs and weatherization. My office held countless meetings with housing and energy efficiency advocates and community organizations to identify the problems and clarify the solutions. These groups, including the Housing Alliance, became our partners in helping us to draft, edit, and finalize the program language. And their input, in addition to the personal testimony shared by Pennsylvania residents, gave shape to legislation that ultimately became the Whole Home Repairs Program. This program builds on existing federal, state, and local home repair and weatherization programs to fill three main gaps identified by practitioners. One is the funding for home repairs. Two, the second is coordination and technical assistance with existing repair programs. And the third is workforce development. So just going through those again, each in turn. The funding for repairs, the Whole Home Repairs Program will provide up to $50,000 in grants for homeowners and in the form of a loan to small landlords with affordability restrictions so that they can make habitability repairs and upgrades for energy efficiency and for accessibility for adaptive modifications. The second pillar, which is the coordination and technical assistance model, is meant to work by allocating resources for support staff to ensure that eligible applicants are accessing the right programs in the right order to meet their needs and maximize their access to holistic repairs. So for example, someone who can help you get your roof repaired through the funding for repairs and then support you through weatherization if you're eligible. Finally, the third pillar is workforce development. We can have all the kind of funding we need for home repairs, but it won't work if we don't have the workforce to build it out. So the Whole Home Repairs Program provides resources to increase retention in home repair and weatherization training programs and pre-apprenticeship programs, including with the provision of cash stipends to trainees, so that our state can build up the workforce needed to meet the demand and keep our skilled workers in the jobs they do local. Next slide, please. This is a program for homeowners and renters alike. Homeowners, as I've said, can apply for grants of up to $50,000, and small landlords, which we define as owning no more than 15 rental units across no more than 5 properties, with affordability restrictions. Their apartments have to rent at up to 60% of AMI, can apply for the same amount in forgivable loans for each unit they rent. The Whole Home Repairs Program also encourages landlords to accept housing choice vouchers, which we expect to have the effect of supporting, retaining, and potentially increasing the amount of affordable housing in a region. This program is will be administered by our state's Department of Community and Economic Development, DCD, which in turn will select county administrators who will, 1, make grants to residents, 2, help people access the assistance they need in the order they need it, and 3, support training and pre-apprenticeship programs and the trainees enrolled in them. Next slide, please. Actually, let's go back one slide if we don't mind. Oh, I got it wrong. Let's go. Sorry, one more slide. There we go. Next one. Great, sorry. So housing insecurity transcends geography, and of course, it transcends political affiliation. When we began to have conversations about this program with legislators interested in housing, we learned that they were aware of this issue, were concerned about its effects on their constituents, and in some instances had been working on it for years. In my very dense urban district in Philadelphia, communities are concerned about displacement and gentrification. In more rural districts, communities are concerned about abandonment and blight. The trigger for all these problems is the lack of ability to repair and maintain one's home. All of us were focused on different stages of the same sweeping cyclical problem. And to address it, we needed to create a shared language with which we could talk about our shared crisis. Ultimately, we were able to bring the Whole Home Repairs Program over the finish line because we were laser focused on a winnable policy that meets the real material needs of urban and rural constituencies alike. And that was championed through a very intense drafting and vetting process, followed by a strategic inside-outside campaign by a coalition of housing, energy, and climate advocates. We did this through hosting events across the state in our week of action in late March of this year, through one-off conversations and lobbying, through bipartisan hearings for the Senate Urban Affairs and Housing Committee, which I chair with Majority Chair Senator Joe Pittman, through letters of support from more than 60 organizations, and through seizing the historic opportunity afforded through funds from the American Rescue Plan. Next slide, please. The Whole Home Repairs Program began as the Whole Home Repairs Act, Senate Bill 1135, which we used as a marker bill to successfully have it added as a line item in the 22-23 state budget, with program language from our bill added to the fiscal code. The strength of the campaign to pass the bill and the resulting support from colleagues in the Senate, Senator Hughes in particular, our leadership in the Senate, and from our governor, was such that we were able to remain uncompromising in advancing what we had built. Next slide, please. So we are working now with the Department of Community and Economic Development during the rollout and implementation of the program over the coming months. First, the department will open applications to counties. After the county administrators of the program are selected and the money is distributed, the counties will be able to open the applications to their residents. The program is expected to open for residents in 2023. We, just ourselves, our own office, have a running list of constituents who have called our office asking for help with home repairs. And this list has over 200 names on it. And we know from other legislative offices that they too are getting calls. Last slide, please. Or next slide, I guess. The Whole Home Repairs Program, just to kind of encompass it, is a housing security initiative. It is an energy initiative, an anti-blight initiative, a jobs initiative, and a community safety initiative. The cumulative effect of all of this means that this program can tackle many of the root causes of community instability by keeping people in their homes and keeping these homes safe and healthy. We won $125 million to create and launch the Whole Home Repairs Program, which is an unprecedented win for housing in our state's legislature. At the same time, we know that the need is enormous. The money we know we won allows us to see the program and show proof of concept. And going forward, we'll need to fight each budget cycle to scale up this program so that we can meet the enormity of the needs statewide. This is a fight to which we're committed and to which our coalition is committed to. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aaron, and the Housing Alliance. And I'm glad to take questions or, at any point. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Saval. And, hopefully we have some questions that come and roll into the chat here. And I'll add, and I've said this before, if you told me a year ago, we're going to get a whole home repair program built in Pennsylvania, I said, well, that's probably unlikely. And then if you told me it's going to get done by a freshman senator from Philadelphia, I'd probably say you're crazy. But it shows how much I know. But everyone needs to appreciate how much work this is and what it took to get this organized across the state, not just in Philadelphia, across the state. We're talking hundreds of people, thousands of people, and it's historic. There's no other word for it. So I can't say that enough. I probably say that often, but I can't hammer that home enough. So again, Senator, thank you. Thank your staff. You guys are definitely the brain trust when it comes to this. So let's see, do we have any questions in the chat?
Actually, Aaron, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're going to hold questions until the end.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that we can move on to the second part.
Okay.
So moving on to the second part. So thank you, Senator Hughes and Senator Saval. And moving into our second part around whole home repair, Senator Saval, thank you. That was a really great overview of the program. I want to introduce Emily Shapira, who is the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Energy Authority, who is going to talk about how her program is addressing the components of the state whole home repair program. So Philadelphia, of course, is just so much bigger in size, right, than any other community in Pennsylvania. And so sometimes people are overwhelmed by that size and aren't quite sure how a program in Philadelphia might be related to what you're doing in your own community. But that is really not the case in this situation. So Senator Saval laid out 3 gaps that whole home repair will address. I'm just going to actually take the 3 and make it 4 because I just want to separate the grants to homeowners from the loans to landlords. And Emily's program is addressing 3 of those 4 components. And so she's going to talk about how her program is addressing a need. So really how it got started. She's going to talk about the ways that her program, again, is addressing those 3 components. She'll share some lessons learned and what has been accomplished. We do have a number of questions. We might run out of time to answer those questions. And if that's the case, we'll make sure to get your questions answered after the webinar. So with that, Emily, I will pass it to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Phyllis. And thanks so much for having me. Let me try to make sure I share this the right way. Can we see this? Presentation mode. Okay, great. Well, I'm really excited to be with you today because I think you're right on, Phyllis. There's a lot of wariness that, you know, maybe what works in Philly won't work other places. And I think we really have focused on building a program that can be sort of put in a box and scaled and shared and used elsewhere, you know, regardless of what types of programs you have existing in your area. So I'm thrilled to share this, and huge thanks to Senator Hughes and Senator Saval for all your work on this. We were, as Aaron said, not sure that this was something that could pass, and we're just thrilled that it has. So I'm with the Philadelphia Energy Authority. I'm our president and CEO. We're a municipal authority, so that's a structure that's allowed statewide. We were formed by our mayor and city council back in 2010, really with the mission of building a robust and equitable clean energy economy in Philly. Over the last 6 years since I joined the organization, we've been building out what we're calling the Philly model. It does 2 things. So first, as we develop projects and programs that invest in clean energy and energy efficiency, that creates a demand for skilled labor. And so we make sure that we have a really well-trained workforce, particularly in underserved neighborhoods where there's very high unemployment, typically among very diverse populations. And so those are the areas we focus. And I'm happy to share as much or as little as you guys want to know about our workforce programs. We have curriculum, we have models that are easily shareable. And in fact, we have a little bit of funding to help share that with you all. The second part of the model is really putting equity first rather than putting it as an afterthought. So as government, we're sort of able to look at, you know, where are there access issues to both resources and capital? You know, where are there systemic things that we can fix as a city government? And that's really where we step in. In 2016, we launched the Philadelphia Energy Campaign with our city council president, Darrell Clark. It's a 10-year, $1 billion investment to create 10,000 jobs in this clean energy economy. We do not have $1 billion. So we've had to design projects and programs that are either financeable or that take advantage of existing sources of funding. We've done about $300 million so far in those first 5 years of the initiative, created about 2,500 jobs. So it's working as we thought it might. I'm not going to go through this slide, but I just want to give you a sense of sort of the breadth and depth of the work that we do. We really try to use city government as a sort of lead by example. So we've done a lot of energy efficiency and renewables work with city government, including big projects at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And we're converting all of our street lighting right now to LEDs. We work closely with the school district and lots of other residential and commercial and industrial programming. Energy is a really awesome entry point for this work. You might be wondering, why is a group focused on energy now looking at low-income housing? And the reason is really that energy brings a whole set of new resources to the table that otherwise have really not been available in the past in any sort of concerted way to drive things like poverty alleviation and improve public health. In Philadelphia, Senator Saval mentioned a lot of this already, so I won't spend too much time on it. Of course, we're the poorest of the 10 largest cities in America. Our housing stock is quite old. I think in the most recent survey, 38% of all homes in Philadelphia needed significant repair. We have all sorts of climate-related issues, including sort of heat differential that really mirrors wealth and poverty in the city, health issues like asthma. And then there are two metrics that we look at quite closely: energy burden and energy insecurity. Our poorest residents in Philadelphia pay about 18% of their income to utilities, making Philly one of the most energy burdened cities in the country. Energy insecurity is sort of a term of art, which you guys all might know, which really just means that you're foregoing food or medicine to pay for utilities, that you're at imminent risk of a shutoff, or that you've set your home to an unsafe or unhealthy temperature in order to keep the heat or lights on. About half of all African-American households in Philadelphia at any income level, and about 30% of all renters face energy insecurity at least once a year. And we've seen this get significantly worse during COVID. So as we looked at residential housing, we heard from PECO, our utility, and from others that they have these state mandated programs through Act 129, where they'll be able to go into someone's house and they see that there are some really significant issues. Miss Buchanan from the King Sussing neighborhood of Philadelphia was kind enough to let us take a look at her house before she received some services and after she received some services as well. And PECO's allowed to go in, take a look, and change the light bulbs and leave. And so they knew that you can't get at meaningful energy efficiency without looking at the issues in the whole home. And so that's where we really started. We walked down the very same path to that of the senators, to make sure that we had input from communities and from the organizations that serve those communities. In Philly alone, this is about a $500 million challenge. We think there are about 60,000 homes that are low income owner occupied that could benefit from this program. We found in Philly, and I think this is true probably everywhere, the various government programs, the utility programs, healthcare programs, nonprofit programs, don't often work well together, and not for lack of trying. There are in Philly lots of examples of really incredible nonprofits who have created these sort of unilateral partnerships, in their territories that they work in, with various other partners. But it's sort of unequally deployed across the city, and of course, a huge administrative burden to those nonprofits. We know that home repair interventions improve all sorts of things: health outcomes, crime, educational outcomes, reducing displacement from gentrification, which is a huge one in Philly. And it also does one other thing that I think really benefits particularly federal programs. The denial rates in all of the home repair programs across the state, particularly for weatherization, but also in utility services, can be as high as about 50% because of another issue in the home. And that's really a function of sort of putting programs in the right order, and supplementing. And I show this picture because Ms. Buchanan got a new roof from Philadelphia's Basic Systems Repair Program, which is funded with federal CDBG dollars. And in that program, it's intended for sort of emergency repairs, and they sort of replace the roof. It's for when you have a hole in the roof, and they put a new roof on, your good condition, and that's it. They don't come into your house and sort of restore the parts of your home that may have damage from water penetration over lots of years. And you can see in her home that there's moldy insulation in her roof, in her ceiling, and these are things that can cause serious health problems down the line. So our program is called Built to Last. It's designed to coordinate and then supplement all of the existing home repair programs. And in your part of the state, you may have some of the same programs that we do. You may have access to state programs. You may not have some of the local city programs that we have, but you certainly have nonprofits, you certainly have utilities, and you may have healthcare systems as well that are wanting to do some of this work. So there are certainly opportunities to put it together. So we look across all of these measures: basic systems repair like roof, electrical systems, plumbing systems, both interior and exterior. In Philly, the lines that run from your house out to the water main are your responsibility. I don't think that's the same everywhere, but it might be. And when those fail, those can be incredibly expensive. repairs and can cause sewage back up into the home. So it's really a health and safety issue. And then on energy efficiency, we've got all the things that are covered under weatherization, as well as under the utility programs in Act 129. But none of those programs actually were doing roof cavity insulation. And in Philly with row homes, that is the #1 best thing that you can do to reduce utility bills because of the design of our home. So we're able to add those types of things in. We also include health and safety. So some of these are covered by other programs, some of them are not. This ranges from things like trip and fall hazards and grab bars, or handicap accessibility, but also to things like mold and pests. In Philadelphia, our health department does not cover bed bug remediation because it's not a vector. But actually, if you have bed bugs, your home health aides may not be willing to come into your home anymore. So a lot of people lose more than just the comfort of having to live with that kind of a pest. And also to Senator Saval's point about lead paint, mold, moisture, those kinds of things. And then I want to talk about solar real quick, because I think that people really view this as a nice to have, but we have not found that. So as we're looking at long-term affordability in a lot of these homes, we found a lot of people don't have any heat at all, or if they do, it's very old, very inefficient, very expensive. Sometimes they still use heating oil. And so everywhere we possibly can, we're converting old systems or not functioning systems to electric heat pumps, which provide both heating and air conditioning, which has gotten more and more critical because of climate change in Philadelphia and increasing temperatures. And then we're adding solar everywhere we can as well, because that creates that long-term affordability for folks. And I'll talk a minute about sort of where the funding came from for this program, since I imagine that might be something you're interested in. So at the moment, we're currently completing our first 50 home pilot. We decided to start with a big enough number that we would learn the lessons we needed to learn to make this work, but also sort of small enough to get it done and get a grip on it. So before whole home repair even passed, we've been already started on this pilot. We received a bit of funding from PHFA through the FAIR grant process a couple of years ago to help support this program. We put some of our own program revenue from other work that we do towards this. And we were really lucky to be able to raise some local grants from corporations and other nonprofit partners. And then recently, because we've gotten sort of this far through it already, we've won 2 federal awards. One was congressionally directed spending, which Senator Casey helped us win in last year's budget. And then we recently won a weatherization enhancement and innovation award from the Department of Energy as well. So our goal is to finish this 50 home pilot. We should be done in the next month or so. Next year, do another 50 homes to tweak and finalize what the program looks like. And then build that up to 500 homes by 2025, 1,000 homes by 2026. And we're very excited for whole home repair. None of this funding expectation includes that funding, but we're excited to see what the guidelines look like and hopefully use that to support the program. So this is sort of what this looks like. This is Philadelphia, in case you're not comfortable with what the map looks like. These purple dots are participants in our city's basic systems repair program. They're all below 60% of area median income. And then the sort of colored census tracts show the average energy burden. So, I mean, you can see this just overlays kind of exactly. The stars are our built to last clients in this first round. So it all sort of just mimics the same thing. Our average energy burden for the 50 homes in our program is about 19%. And we actually have a couple folks that don't have any income at all. So you can imagine how difficult that is to afford utilities. Each home is getting about 4 to 5 programs. So instead of sort of just applying for one and then having to figure out how to apply for the next one, we create sort of a centralized intake process. So we're collecting all of their income information and household information once, and then we're able to use that to apply to all the rest of the programs. We're hoping that this will ultimately only take 18 weeks. We're currently trending at about 26 weeks, but we're working on that to get it to be a quicker process. We're spending currently about $43,000 per home on average. Some cost more than that, some cost less. That doesn't include solar. It doesn't include a lot of the PICO measures as well. We're still tracking that. We've been supplementing with about $11,000 per home. So no other programs or pays for about 11K. We've been doing customer surveys or before and after and during. Folks are satisfied. We've avoided weatherization deferrals in about a quarter of the projects. So we're really excited about that. The most common weatherization deferral is mold. If you have mold in the house, you can't do a blower door test safely without causing health problems in the home. So that's a really common cause for deferral. We're also doing electrification in about 35% of the projects, and solar actually turned out to be viable at all of them. So we're prioritizing the ones with the highest energy burdens and the ones with heat pumps. So if we've done electrification at your home, this keeps your bill to zero, basically. These are the types of repairs we've done. Some we were expecting, some we weren't. This one, there's a single bathroom in the home, and this was the bathroom. I think the owner imagined he might be a little handier than he turned out to be. So we were able to put in a whole bathroom. This is the really typical kitchen situation. There was no sink in this kitchen. And you can see, we're not, these are not granite countertops. We're not doing sort of very fancy repairs, but they are functional repairs. This was an electrification project that we did. So you can see their old furnace, which was really not working when we got there. And on the right side are the pics of the heat pumps. We've done some accessibility work as well, just basic stair access to the home. This is a really common one we see. Habitat for Humanity tells us all the time that this is a repair they do over and over, where the stairs to the basement are not functional. So they often can't qualify for programs like we have for PGW, where they'll come and fix your heater or your hot water heater. But if you can't access the basement, then they can't do it. This home was actually using this stove. It has no door, if you can tell that. But we did actually replace that system. And then in Philly, we might see this other places, but in Philly, knob and tube wiring is really common. That's something that we have to remediate anyway if we want to put attic insulation in, but it's valuable to remediate it regardless because of the electrical issues that can cause. So I think a lot of these are kind of universal issues. And I'll just end with training. So as I mentioned up front, we try to pair all of these programs with workforce development programs. And this is our Green Retrofit Immersive Training Program, GRIT. It's an 18-week program. We have about 20 students each year who go through the program. It's focused on residential construction. I think that's been a gap where we just really have not had enough labor available to those small contractors who typically do this kind of work. And so we have a full curriculum for this. We partner with the Energy Coordinating Agency here in Philly to use their training lab. And we're more than happy to sort of share this model with anybody else who wants to do it. And we also run Bright Solar Futures, which I won't talk about as much, but those students will have a chance to work on Built to Last as well. So I'll leave it there. I know we have a bunch of questions and only a couple of minutes, so maybe we have time for one or two.
Great, thanks, Emily. So we do have a number of questions. There are a number of questions about the whole home repair program at the state level. And I'm going to direct some of those questions to Senator Saval. So there are some answers that we and Senator Saval won't have because the program guidelines are not yet available. But I think there is a good deal of information in the text of the legislation itself. So Senator Saval, can you talk about the types of repairs that can be covered through this program?
Absolutely. So the language of the legislation as it was adopted in the code is fairly broad. I mean, it covers habitability concerns, energy or water efficiency, that is the repairs that can improve those things, or accessibility. So accessibility, making units accessible for individuals with disabilities. That's the coverage of, you know, of what can be included in that. So it's, you know, it's intentionally meant to cover, to be broad. So things that fall into that fall into habitability concerns. So, you know, lead could fall into that. Of course, Philadelphia, for example, has a lead abatement program, but, you know, but insofar as also there are things that are not covered by existing programs, this ought to be able to fill you know, some of those gaps. So it is meant to be fairly wide ranging.
Great. And then how will funding be distributed? I'm not sure if we know that. Will the funding be available to every county? And then the related question is who can apply? Is it just local government? There's a few questions where people are asking, is it the county? Who are the applicants? Who can apply for it once it's available?
Absolutely. So it is a voluntary program. So the money is not distributed by formula. It's not distributed to every county, unless, of course, every county opted in. But this is meant to be, if a county wishes to participate in the program, they would be eligible for the money. But what you would have to have is a single grant, a single entity in the county. So it could be the county, you know, redevelopment authority, or it could be a nonprofit. Basically, and it would be a single grantee that is meant to do all three components of the program. Which very similar to Built to Last, the repairs, coordination, and workforce development. There can be, you know, sub-granting, it's meant to encourage collaboration, you know, of the kind of coordination, for example, that Emily, you know, that is really quite wonderful and Built to Last, which was an inspiration for our legislation. So but it is, so again, it's not distributed by formula. County can opt in. It would be a single grantee in the county, could be a redevelopment authority or another kind of nonprofit entity that would then administer all three components of the program.
And a follow-up to what you just said, is there any requirement that organizations in a county get together to figure out who should apply? Or is it just, it would be a good idea to do that?
In the sense of, it would be sorry, it just took me a second to understand. Yeah, it would be, you know, in many respects, I mean, I think that, you know, kind of what Emily was speaking to, the coordination part is key. So we would hope that, you know, in most instances, not one entity doesn't kind of do all of the things. You know, for example, the way that there's the repair program, but workforce development is in Philadelphia. The energy coordinating agencies does a lot of that work. So I think encouraging collaboration is part of the intent of the program. But there would be a kind of single entity that is the kind of key administrator of the program.
Okay. And just assuming that you don't have a hard stop, if I could just ask a few more questions and we'll just go for just a few more minutes. Can you talk about the funding for landlords? Would you address?
Oh yeah, of course.
Just talk about that again.
Yeah, so the funding for landlords is basically, and it's up to $50,000 in the form of a forgivable loan to a small landlord. We define small landlord as someone owning no more than 15 units over no more than 5 properties. The unit that you would want to apply this to would have to rent at 60% of area median income or below. And the terms of the loan is forgivable, contingent on certain kinds of affordability restrictions being followed. And those are that you would not increase the base rent of the apartment by more than 3% every year for a period of 15 years. And so if you follow those guidelines for that period for 15 years, that loan is then forgiven. It turns into a grant. So absent that, the county is can claw back the funds. So that, you know, and I think I saw a question to this effect: how can you ensure that this doesn't prevent, you know, this doesn't encourage gentrification or in apartments of that kind? That those affordability restrictions are meant to do that.
Okay. And I'm just going to ask one additional question. If your question wasn't answered today, we will send out answers to those questions. But is there language included in the legislation, or are there just thoughts about how to ensure a somewhat equitable distribution across the state?
So that's a very good question in terms of, you know, the kind of, if there would be say a minimum amount that would be required. These are kinds of considerations that are taking place, you know, that we would have to kind of work out at guidelines. There's nothing in the legislation that, you know, mandates a certain amount of money be distributed to any particular place. You know, the way the legislation right now is, it's essentially based on, you know, we want to address people who want to do the work, for where there's a demonstrated need. Beyond that, there's not much that's specified, but there may be more that we do in guidelines to figure that out.
Great. So I will end by saying thank you. Senator Hughes had to leave, so thank you to him, even though he can't hear me say it. Thank you, Senator Saval. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Aaron, for sharing today. As we've said a few times, the information is not yet publicly available about whole home repair in terms of specific guidelines. We will send out the presentations. We also will send out the legislative language, because there is a lot of detail that was included in the legislative language, so that as you begin to think about having this program in your community, you can start that planning process. I will say that the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, DCED, is the one that will be administering the program. I know that they are working very hard to figure out the guidelines. The deputy secretary had said that he's trying to put out public information by November, but he's not sure he's going to be able to meet that goal. They're, you know, doing a lot of things. So hopefully we'll have more information in November. It might be a little bit later than that. And then he said that he's hoping to open applications very early in the year in 2023. So I think that there's a lot more that we'll be able to share hopefully soon. I also will say, I think we're going to learn a lot from this program. In addition to the grants and the loans to homeowners and to landlords, this whole concept about coordinating services and how do we make sure that it's as easy as it can be for the people that need it. You know, I think we still all have a lot of work to do to figure out how to do that, while at the same time following all the rules and regulations that need to be followed with public funding. So, so thank you again. Thanks to everyone for their advocacy, and we'll hopefully see you on a future webinar and our conference in Hershey. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.